The copper-sweet scent of blood hung in the recycled air of Kara Station, mingling with the acrid chemical undertones that had become the hallmark of failing life support systems throughout the orbital facility. Vincent Vin Carrick steadied himself against the auction hall's metal railing as another gravity fluctuation rippled through the chamber, causing several of the wealthier attendees to clutch at their ornate clothing with expressions of distaste. At 58, Vin's heavily augmented frame absorbed the gravitational shift better than most. His left arm, a military-grade prosthetic from his third campaign, whirred quietly as micro-stabilizers compensated. The right leg, similarly enhanced after the Proxima Centauri conflict, adjusted its weight distribution automatically. Scars visible along his neck disappeared beneath the high collar of his utilitarian jacket, a relic from a time when he'd had a uniform, a purpose, and comrades who understood what it meant to stand for something beyond profit. The auction hall of Kara Station represented everything he'd come to despise about civilian life in 2237. Once a proud waypoint for scientific expeditions and cultural exchanges, the station had devolved into a glorified marketplace, where anything and anyone could be bought for the right price, legally or otherwise. Vin hadn't planned to attend the auction. His modest veteran's pension barely covered his rented quarters and synthesized rations. But the manifest listing had cycled across his terminal during a routine scan. Lot 73 exotic biological specimens, Draconius minimus 8 juvenile specimens, harvested from Sector 9 provisional origin unknown. Sector 9, the restricted conservation zone established after the Vega uprisings. The data crystal burned in his pocket, a small inheritance from Dr. Elena Solaris, the xenobiologist who'd fought alongside his unit and died, saving 3 worlds from biological warfare. Her final gift to him: for when you find something worth protecting again, Vin. The auctioneer, a thin-faced woman with iridescent eye implants and a voice sharpened by years of corporate elocution training, motioned toward the central display. Ladies, gentlemen, and distinguished beings of all designations, we have reached our final offering of the evening. 8 specimens of what our xenobiology consultants have classified as Draconius minimus miniature dragons, if you will. A ripple of murmurs passed through the crowd as the display activated, revealing a sealed, transparent container. Inside, 8 creatures huddled together in a defensive formation. Even from his position at the back of the hall, Vin recognized the iridescent wing membranes, the delicate spiraling horns, and the trembling movements of their synchronized breathing. These rare specimens were recovered from an abandoned research outpost. The auctioneer continued her voice, carrying the polished lie without hesitation. Perfect for private collections, research facilities, or high-end exotic companionship services. Bidding begins at 20,000 universal credits. Vin's prosthetic hand closed into a fist. The creatures in that container weren't Draconius minimus. They were vegan chorus dragons, sentient beings, whose song-based culture had been all but eradicated during the corporate expansion into their home system. Elena's research had proven their sapience beyond question, documenting complex linguistic patterns and cultural memory transmission through harmonic resonance. Research that had been classified and buried after corporate interests designated Vega a resource-rich zone ripe for exploitation. 25,000, called a voice from the front row, a representative from Neurobiological Systems, their logo glowing on her collar. 30,000, countered another bidder, this one wearing the unmistakable insignia of a private collector with more wealth than conscience. Vin moved forward, each step heavy with purpose. His augmented vocal cords, another relic of battlefield medicine, projected his voice with perfect clarity as he spoke. I invoke the Cultural Sanctuary Clause under Galactic Council Resolution 1173B. The auction hall fell silent. The auctioneer's smile froze, then tightened at the corners. Sir, these are non-sentient biological specimens classified under... Those are vegan chorus dragons, Vin interrupted, continuing his approach toward the display. Sentient beings protected under Section 3 of the Post-Vega Accords. Their harvesting from Sector 9 constitutes a violation of at least 6 separate conservation statutes and 3 sentient rights provisions. The auctioneer's implants flashed with irritation. "Security, please escort this gentleman." "I have documentation." Vin withdrew the data crystal, its surface catching the light as he held it up. Research by Dr. Elena Solaris, lead xenobiologist of the Vega expedition. Proof of sentience, cultural heritage, and protected status. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Dr. Solaris's name still carried weight in scientific circles, even years after her death. The auctioneer's voice dropped to a hiss. "Sir, this is a legitimate business operation. These specimens were legally acquired and... Then, you won't mind if we verify that through official channels." Vin's tone left no room for negotiation. "Under the Cultural Sanctuary Clause, I'm asserting provisional custody until proper authorities can make a determination." 2 security personnel approached, their hands hovering near weapons. The auctioneer raised a hand to halt them, her business instincts calculating the public relations disaster that would ensue if she ordered the forcible removal of a decorated veteran invoking conservation law. "This auction is temporarily suspended, pending verification of classification," she announced, her voice crisp with professional detachment. "Lot 73 will be placed in secure holding until..." "Under the clause, specimens of disputed status must be maintained in conditions suitable for sentient life," Vin interrupted. "My quarters are registered as suitable for oxygen-breathing humanoids. I'll take custody until this matter is resolved." For a moment, the auctioneer's facade cracked, revealing the cold calculation beneath. Then she nodded sharply. "A temporary arrangement only. Security will accompany you and the specimens to your quarters. Station administration will expect full cooperation with the investigation." Vin didn't bother pointing out that an investigation would reveal the illegal harvesting operation. That battle would come later. For now, his only concern was getting the dragonlings to safety. As the container was transferred to a hover trolley, he caught his first close look at the creatures inside. 8 pairs of multifaceted eyes turned toward him in perfect unison, their pupils contracting in the harsh lights of the auction hall. The smallest one, its wings not yet fully developed, emitted a soft trill that sent a shiver down Vin's spine. They knew. Somehow they understood he wasn't there to buy them. The journey through Kara Station's corridors was tense and silent. The security personnel flanking him made no attempt at conversation, their expressions suggesting they'd already calculated how this situation would resolve a deluded veteran, overstepping his bounds, soon to be dealt with by corporate legal teams, who would ensure the profitable specimens reached their intended destination. Vin's quarters occupied a small section of the station's outer ring, a single room with attached hygiene facilities, standard for mid-tier rentals. As the security team prepared to depart, the lead officer delivered her parting message with practiced neutrality. "Station administration will contact you regarding disposition of the specimens within 24 standard hours. Attempts to remove them from these premises will result in immediate confiscation and charges under station commerce regulations." Vin acknowledged with a nod, waiting until the door sealed shut before turning his attention to the container. The dragonlings had maintained their defensive huddle during transport, their breathing synchronized in a pattern that, according to Elena's research, indicated extreme distress. Carefully, he released the environmental seals on the container. The lid hissed open, releasing a faint mist of sterile preservative compound, suitable for maintaining biological specimens, but woefully inadequate for sentient beings. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said softly, keeping his distance from the opening. "You're safe now." The dragonlings remained motionless, their iridescent scales reflecting the dim light of his quarters. According to Elena's notes, Vegan chorus dragons communicated primarily through harmonic vibrations and could detect emotional states through subtle variations in vocal patterns. Drawing on fragmented memories of Elena's field techniques, Vin began to hum a low, steady tone that he gradually shaped into the simple recognition melody she had documented in her research. The sound was rough, human vocal cords, a poor substitute for the crystalline resonance chambers that allowed the dragons their sophisticated harmonic language. For several minutes, nothing changed. Then slowly, the smallest dragonling uncurled its wings, revealing delicate membrane patterns that shifted like star maps as it rose to a half-standing position. A soft trilling emerged from its throat, cautious but deliberate. Vin smiled, feeling something unlock in his chest for the first time in years. "That's right. I'm a friend of Elena's." He moved slowly to his terminal, keeping his movements deliberate and non-threatening. The data crystal slid into the reader port, its contents unlocking to his biometric signature. Images and text filled the display, Elena's comprehensive documentation of vegan chorus dragon physiology, behavior, and cultural patterns. "Let's get you properly settled," he murmured, scanning through the files for immediate care instructions. The hygiene chamber provided the most suitable space for adaptation. Working methodically, Vin reconfigured the shower unit into a shallow basin, adjusting the water mineralization to approximate the conditions of the dragon's native environment. According to Elena's notes, juvenile dragons required regular immersion in mineral-rich water to support their developing communication membranes. When the basin was prepared, he returned to the container. The dragonlings had shifted position now, arranged in a semicircle facing the room, their heads tilted in identical angles of assessment. "This way," he said, gesturing toward the hygiene chamber. "There's water." For a moment, none of them moved. Then, with a soft chorus of trills, they rose together and glided from the container in formation, their wings extending just enough to stabilize their movement. They crossed the room like a synchronized unit, maintaining precise distances from each other. In the hygiene chamber, they approached the water with evident caution, the largest dragonling extending a claw to test the surface. A ripple of communication passed between them, subtle wing vibrations and harmonic vocalizations, too complex for human ears to fully distinguish. Then, as if reaching a collective decision, they entered the water together, submerging their lower bodies while keeping their wings carefully elevated. The effect was immediate. Their scales brightened, membranes expanded, and the tension in their posture visibly decreased. Vin consulted Elena's notes again, this time focusing on nutritional requirements. The station's food synthesizer had limited programming, but with some modifications, he managed to produce a compound that approximated the enzymatic profile they needed, primarily proteins with specific mineral concentrations. When he returned with the prepared sustenance, the dragonlings had arranged themselves in the water, in a perfect circle, their wings partially extended to create a connected pattern across the surface. They turned to observe him with that unsettling synchronicity, 8 pairs of multifaceted eyes tracking his movement. "Food," he explained, setting the container at the edge of the basin. The smallest dragonling approached first, examining the offering before communicating to the others through a series of wing flashes. After apparent deliberation, they each took turns consuming small portions, their feeding behavior methodical and restrained. As the station's day cycle lights dimmed to simulate evening, Vin settled into his sleeping alcove, positioning himself where he could observe the hygiene chamber. The dragonlings remained in the water, occasionally shifting positions, but maintaining their connection through wing or tail contact. Sleep came fitfully, his military-trained senses alert to any change in his environment. Sometime during the station's night cycle, he woke to a sound unlike anything he'd heard before, a harmonic convergence of 8 distinct tonal patterns, interwoven with such precision that they created something greater than their components. Vin rose, silently moving to the entrance of the hygiene chamber. The dragonlings had formed a perfect circle in the water, their wings fully extended and touching at the tips. From their throats came the extraordinary harmonic cascade that had woken him, not simply sound, but something that seemed to bypass his auditory processing entirely. Images formed in his mind, star patterns. He didn't recognize crystalline structures rising from ancient oceans and vast migrations of creatures with wings that caught the light of 3 suns. A culture's memory preserved in song. The data crystal on his terminal pulsed with sudden activity, its storage matrix reconfiguring to incorporate new information. The Dragonling song was transmitting data, updating and expanding Elena's research with their own living knowledge. When the song finally ebbed, the Dragonlings settled into a resting formation, their energies apparently depleted by the effort. Vin returned to his alcove, but sleep eluded him. The images from their song replayed in his mind, carrying an emotional weight that transcended language loss, determination, and a desperate hope. By morning, he understood what he needed to do. The station administration's message arrived precisely on schedule. Its tone professionally neutral, but its content unmistakably threatening. Representative Lorca from the Galactic Corporate Authority's Xenobiological Resources Division will conduct an inspection at 1400 hours to resolve classification questions regarding the specimens in your temporary custody. The GCA's Xenobiological Resources Division, the corporate arm that had quietly absorbed what had once been the Independent Galactic Conservation Corps. Their resolution would undoubtedly involve reclassifying the Dragonlings as non-sentient resources under the recently passed Resource Management Act, which conveniently placed profit potential above established conservation protocols. Vin spent the morning preparing. First, he transferred Elena's complete research from the crystal to secure off-site storage nodes insurance against the inevitable attempt to confiscate or corrupt the data. Next, he studied the exact provisions of the Cultural Sanctuary Clause, identifying the legal leverage points he could exploit to delay corporate seizure. Finally, he adapted his quarter's environmental controls, creating backup systems that would maintain suitable conditions for the Dragonlings, even if station administration attempted to pressure him through life support manipulation, a common tactic when dealing with difficult residents. Throughout his preparations, the Dragonlings observed with evident interest, occasionally exchanging harmonic communications that suggested they understood the situation's gravity. The smallest one remained close to him, its wing patterns shifting to display complex geometric structures whenever he glanced in its direction. At precisely 1400 hours, his door announced the arrival of Representative Lorca and her technical support team, a euphemism for the 3 security operatives whose weapons were poorly concealed beneath standard station uniforms. Lorca herself embodied corporate efficiency, sleek polished, and utterly without warmth. Her gaze swept the quarters lingering on the hygiene chamber, where the Dragonlings had arranged themselves in a defensive formation. "Mr. Carrick," she began, not bothering with pleasantries, "I understand you've made claims regarding the classification of these specimens." Vin nodded, maintaining a neutral expression. "Not claims, facts. These are Vegan chorus dragons, sentient beings protected under multiple conservation statutes." Lorca's smile didn't reach her eyes. "A common misidentification. These specimens merely resemble the protected species. Our Xenobiology division has thoroughly documented the distinctions." She gestured and one of her team handed her a datapad, which she extended toward Vin. "You'll find our certification of non-sentient status here, along with transport authorization to our research facility." Vin didn't take the pad. "I have contradicting research from Dr. Elena Solaris, the leading authority on vegan species classification. Dr. Solaris's work, while historically significant, has been superseded by more recent studies," Lorca countered smoothly. "The Resource Management Act gives clear guidance on resolving such discrepancies. In cases of disputed classification, specimens are placed under GCA oversight, pending final determination." She gestured toward the hygiene chamber. "We've brought appropriate containment equipment. I assure you they'll be well maintained during the review process." The containment unit her team had brought was a standard biological specimen transport module designed for non-sentient creatures, with no consideration for the complex social and environmental needs of intelligent beings. Vin positioned himself between Lorca and the hygiene chamber entrance. "I'm maintaining custody under Provision 4C of the Cultural Sanctuary Clause, which specifies that disputed specimens remain in established suitable conditions until council arbitration." Lorca's professional veneer cracked slightly. The Council's nearest arbitration team is 3 months' transit from this sector. These specimens require specialized care that only our facilities can provide. They seem to be thriving under current conditions, Vin replied evenly. I'm following Dr. Solaris's protocols for care and environmental needs. Mr. Carrick, Lorca's tone hardened. You're interfering with a legally sanctioned corporate acquisition. Continued obstruction will result in charges under the commercial interference statutes. As a veteran, you should understand the importance of respecting proper authority. The security operatives shifted their posture, subtly, hands moving closer to their weapons. Vin recognized the escalation tactics, intimidation followed by force, all within the technically legal boundaries that corporations had carefully constructed around their operations. Before he could respond, a new sound filled the quarters building slowly, but with deliberate precision. The dragonlings had begun to sing, but unlike their nighttime harmony, this was something else entirely. Their voices rose in perfect coordination, creating sound patterns that seemed to physically interact with the environment. Lorca winced, raising a hand to her ear. What is that noise? Silence those creatures immediately. The security team similarly reacted, their expressions shifting from concentration to discomfort as the harmonic cascade intensified. The station's communication panels activated spontaneously, displays filling with rapidly scrolling data. Biological readings, neural response patterns, and complex linguistic analysis. The data crystal on Vin's terminal pulsed with increasing intensity, projecting holographic representations of the dragonling's brain activity patterns, unmistakable signatures of advanced sentience and cultural memory. That, Vin said quietly, is the endless song, the core cultural heritage of the Vegan chorus dragons. What you're experiencing is direct neural transmission of their collective memory. According to Dr. Solaris's research, only sentient beings can produce this level of harmonic complexity. Lorca stared at the displays, her corporate composure crumbling as the evidence mounted. The harmonic cascade continued, somehow reaching beyond the confines of his quarters. Throughout the station, communication systems activated, broadcasting the dragonling song and accompanying data to every terminal and public display. Stop this immediately, Lorca demanded, but her authoritative tone had vanished. This is a violation of station communication protocols. I'm not doing anything, Vin replied truthfully. They are. The harmonic cascade reached its climax, and with it came a new projection, the official Galactic Council seal, appearing on every display, followed by an automated notification. Sentient Rights Protection Protocol activated. Classification dispute logged with Council Monitoring Division. Corporate seizure action suspended pending investigation. The security team exchanged uncertain glances, their training not having prepared them for this scenario. Lorca's expression cycled through shock, anger, and finally careful calculation. This changes nothing, she said, her voice low and controlled. The Council's response time in this sector is measured in months. Station administration will not tolerate disruption to commerce operations for that duration. Alternative measures will be implemented. Translation: they would find another legal angle or simply create one. You have 24 hours to resolve this situation, Mr. Carrick. Lorca continued, already moving toward the door. After that station, security will enforce commercial priority protocols. When they had departed, Vin turned to the dragonlings who had ceased their song and now watched him with evident exhaustion. The smallest one trembled visibly, the effort of the harmonic cascade having depleted its limited reserves. You've bought us some time, he said softly, approaching the basin to check their condition. But she's right about one thing: we can't stay here. The largest dragonling extended its wings, the membranes rippling with a series of complex patterns. In Vin's mind, images formed: a small transport vessel, star patterns, and a distant moon orbiting a gas giant, coordinates delivered with perfect clarity. Your sanctuary, he realized. You remember the way home. The dragonling's eyes blinked in affirmation, followed by a soft harmonic trill that conveyed urgency and hope. Vin nodded, decision crystallizing. Then that's where we're going. Working with quiet efficiency, Vin began preparations for departure. His military background served him well, each task approached with tactical precision. First, the logistical challenges securing a small transport capable of reaching the coordinates without drawing attention, gathering supplies sufficient for an extended journey, and creating a suitable habitat within the vessel's limited space. The station's rental service provided the vessel an outdated but serviceable DL-7 shuttle, typically used by independent traders for short-range operations. Its life support systems were basic but adaptable, and most importantly, its navigation system was old enough to lack the corporate tracking protocols that had become standard in newer models. While station commerce records would show a routine rental, Vin's modifications to the craft's identification transponder, a skill acquired during his second campaign, would ensure they disappeared from monitoring systems once beyond station range. The Dragonlings seemed to understand the gravity of their situation. Throughout the preparation process, they conserved energy, remaining in the mineral bath and consuming minimal resources. Occasionally, they communicated among themselves through wing patterns and soft harmonics that Vin couldn't fully interpret, but their coordinated behavior suggested a collective decision-making process. As the station's day cycle approached its end, Vin completed the final modifications to the shuttle's cargo compartment, converting it into a suitable habitat by installing the mineral bath components from his quarters and adapting the atmospheric controls to maintain optimal conditions. The data crystal, now containing both Elena's research and the Dragonlings' transmitted cultural knowledge, would serve as both navigation guide and translator during their journey. Vin secured it in the shuttle's primary computer port, where it integrated seamlessly with the navigation systems overlaying the Dragonlings' star maps onto standard charts. Moving the Dragonlings to the shuttle presented the greatest risk of detection. Station security monitored all docking bay activity, particularly during night cycle, when legitimate commerce operations were minimal. Vin considered various approaches, eventually settling on the simplest solution: hiding in plain sight. Using his veteran status, he requisitioned a standard biological transport container from Station Medical Services, citing a need to relocate personal therapeutic companions to his new vessel. The request raised no alarms. Many veterans maintained emotional support creatures to help manage the psychological aftermath of combat. The Dragonlings, seemingly understanding the necessity for discretion, settled into the container, without resistance, arranging themselves in a compact formation that minimized their distinctive features. Vin covered the container with a standard commercial shield, a privacy measure common enough to avoid scrutiny. As he moved through the station corridors toward the docking bay, Vin maintained the measured pace and confident posture of someone conducting routine business. Years of military operations had taught him that behavior often determines scrutiny more than appearance. Act as if you belong, and most security systems, both technological and human, will classify you as a non-threat. The night shift security officer at the docking bay barely glanced at his authorization, more interested in returning to her entertainment feed than questioning a veteran's business. With practiced efficiency, Vin loaded the container into the shuttle and completed the pre-launch sequence, each action deliberate but unhurried. Only when the docking clamps released and the shuttle drifted free of the station did Vin allow himself a moment of reflection. Kara Station had been his home, a poor one perhaps, but the only place he'd managed to establish even a semblance of stability after his discharge. Now he was leaving, embarking on a journey toward unnamed coordinates, with 8 endangered creatures and a data crystal as his only guide. No turning back now, he murmured, engaging the drive systems, once they'd cleared the station's immediate traffic zone. In the converted cargo compartment, the Dragonlings emerged from their container, stretching their wings in evident relief. The smallest one approached the cockpit entrance, its multifaceted eyes reflecting the starlight streaming through the viewport. "We're going to your sanctuary," Vin told it, although he wasn't certain how much human language they comprehended. "It's going to be a long journey." The dragonling trilled softly in response, its wing membranes shimmering with patterns that matched the star configuration currently visible beyond the shuttle. Then, it extended a delicate claw toward the navigation console, where the data crystal pulsed with soft blue light. Understanding dawned on Vin. "You want to update our course." The dragonling's eyes blinked in affirmation. When Vin adjusted the console to allow input, the creature extended its wing directly over the crystal. Instantly, the navigation display refined the course calculations, becoming more precise as hidden gravitational variables and stellar drift patterns were incorporated into the equations. "You navigate by the stars," Vin realized. "That's what your wing patterns represent, stellar cartography encoded in biological form." The dragonling emitted a harmonic tone that resonated with the crystal, causing the display to shift again, this time revealing a three-dimensional representation of their destination. A small moon, orbiting a gas giant, its surface marked with distinctive formations that resembled the crystalline structures Vin had glimpsed during their first night song. According to the updated navigation data, reaching the sanctuary would require 3 weeks of travel, including several complex gravitational slingshot maneuvers to avoid detection by corporate monitoring outposts. The route would take them through territories nominally under Galactic Council protection, but increasingly infiltrated by corporate interests, seeking to exploit loopholes in conservation regulations. "We'll need to be careful," Vin said more to himself than the dragonling. "Corporate security will be watching for unauthorized transports, especially after that stunt we pulled on the station." The dragonling's response was a complex harmonic sequence that somehow conveyed understanding and reassurance. Then, it returned to the cargo compartment where the others had arranged themselves in their now familiar circular formation wings, touching at the tips. Alone in the cockpit, Vin set the autopilot for the first leg of their journey and leaned back in the pilot's seat, watching the stars drift past the viewport. The decision to leave had been impulsive by his usual standards, a sharp departure from the careful, isolated existence he'd constructed since his discharge. Yet, something about this mission felt right, in a way nothing had since his military service ended. Not the violence of those years, he'd seen enough death for several lifetimes, but the purpose, the clarity of knowing his actions served something greater than himself. Elena would have approved. He could almost hear her voice, passionate, as always when discussing the Vegan chorus dragons. "They're not just animals, Vin. They're the last remnants of an entire civilization, living vessels of cultural memory. Their song contains millennia of knowledge we can barely comprehend." She had died, protecting that knowledge, refusing to surrender her research, when corporate interests decided the Vegan system's resources were more valuable than its native species. Official reports classified her death as an unfortunate research accident, but Vin and others in their unit knew the truth. Now, years later, he was completing her mission. The thought brought a peace he hadn't expected. The journey's first week passed without incident, the shuttle maintaining its course through the less traveled routes that the data crystal had identified. Vin established a routine dividing his time between monitoring their progress, maintaining the shuttle systems, and observing the dragonlings. Their behavior fascinated him. Unlike other species he'd encountered during his service, the dragons operated as a true collective, their individual actions serving the group's needs with remarkable efficiency. They took turns maintaining the mineral bath's chemical balance, using their wings to filter and rejuvenate the solution when it began to degrade. Their communication grew more sophisticated as they recovered from the stress of captivity. What had begun as simple harmonic exchanges evolved into complex musical dialogues, often accompanied by synchronized wing patterns that created holographic-like projections in the air above them. Through trial and error, Vin learned to recognize certain patterns. A rapid ascending sequence followed by a 3-note descent signaled concern about environmental conditions. A rolling harmonic with wingtips pointing inward indicated hunger. and each night cycle they performed what he came to think of as the memory song, a collective harmonic that seemed to strengthen their connection to each other and their cultural heritage. The smallest dragonling, which Vin had begun thinking of as Scout, due to its tendency to investigate new areas, first spent increasing time in the cockpit, observing the navigation systems with evident interest. It seemed particularly fascinated by the data crystal, often extending its wing membranes near the device, as if communicating directly with Elena's research. On the journey's 8th day, the shuttle's proximity alert activated, indicating an approaching vessel. Vin immediately reduced power to non-essential systems, implementing the stealth protocols he'd prepared for this eventuality. "We have company," he told Scout, who had appeared at the cockpit entrance at the first sound of the alert. "Better get the others ready for emergency maneuvers." Scout disappeared into the cargo compartment. Moments later, Vin heard a complex harmonic sequence different from their usual communications, sharper and more urgent. The approaching vessel, now visible on sensors, broadcast a standard corporate security identification, a GCA enforcement cruiser, likely conducting routine patrols of this sector. Its course would bring it within visual range of the shuttle within minutes. Standard procedure for corporate security, encountering unregistered vessels, involved forced docking and inspection, with any valuable cargo automatically claimed under salvage regulations, a convenient way to circumvent ownership disputes. Vin's hands moved across the control console, implementing the evasion strategy he'd planned during his military years. The shuttle's systems responded sluggishly. Civilian vessels weren't designed for combat maneuvers, but the basic principles remained valid. Minimize energy signatures, use natural phenomena as cover, and when necessary, create confusion. "Hold on," he called toward the cargo compartment, as he cut main power and initiated a controlled drift toward a nearby asteroid field. The shuttle's momentum would carry them into the gravitational influence of the larger rocks, where sensor readings would be naturally disrupted by mineral compositions and radiation patterns. The corporate vessel adjusted course to intercept its sensors, having detected their presence despite the power reduction. Vin grimaced. Newer security ships were equipped with advanced detection systems, specifically designed to counter smuggling tactics. Then, something unexpected happened. From the cargo compartment emerged a harmonic cascade, unlike anything he'd heard from the dragonlings, before a concentrated burst of sound that seemed to compress the air itself. The shuttle's communication system activated spontaneously, broadcasting a complex signal pattern outward before Vin could intervene. "What are you?" He began, turning toward the cockpit entrance, where all 8 dragonlings now hovered, their wings extended, in perfect synchronization. The corporate vessel's approach suddenly faltered, its trajectory becoming erratic. Their sensors would be receiving impossible readings, phantom energy signatures, multiple vessel identifications, and contradictory gravitational data. The dragonling's harmonic was creating the equivalent of a sophisticated electronic countermeasure, but through purely biological means. Taking advantage of the confusion, Vin guided the shuttle deeper into the asteroid field, using minimal thrusters to navigate between the larger bodies. Behind them, the corporate vessel had begun a standard search pattern, but its sensors were clearly still compromised, scanning in completely wrong vectors. When they had put sufficient distance between themselves and the patrol, Vin restored partial power, enough to maintain life support, and minimal navigation functions. The dragonlings remained near the cockpit, their harmonic gradually fading as the immediate danger passed. "That was impressive," Vin acknowledged, studying their collective expression of exhaustion. "But we should conserve those tricks for when we really need them." Scout approached the navigation console, extending a wing toward the display. The projected course adjusted slightly, indicating a narrow passage between 2 particularly dense asteroid clusters, a route that would provide additional concealment as they exited the field. "Agreed," Vin nodded, implementing the suggested navigation adjustment. "We'll lie low for a while." The encounter reinforced the precarious nature of their journey. Corporate interests clearly had reason to believe the dragonlings were valuable enough to justify expanded patrols in typically neglected sectors. Whether they were searching specifically for Vin's shuttle or simply increasing general vigilance remained unclear, but the practical implications were the same. They needed to be even more cautious. For the next 5 days, Vin maintained minimal power usage, navigating through the margins of established trade routes, where traffic monitoring was less comprehensive. The Dragonlings adapted to the reduced energy state, their activities becoming more measured and efficient. They seemed to understand the necessity of conservation, both of the shuttle's resources and their own biological energy. During this period of enforced quiet, Vin spent more time studying the data crystal's contents. Elena's research was even more extensive than he'd initially realized, documenting not only the biological characteristics of the Vegan chorus dragons, but their complex cultural structures. Knowledge passed through generations via their harmonic transmissions. According to her notes, the dragons had once been the primary sentient species of the Vegan system, developing a civilization based not on physical construction, but on harmonically shaped energy fields. Their architecture existed as stable resonance patterns invisible to most species, but functionally equivalent to the concrete and metal structures of human settlements. The system's devastation during corporate resource extraction had destroyed these harmonic constructs, disrupting the dragons' ability to maintain their civilization. What had appeared to human observers as a simple ecosystem collapse had actually been the destruction of an entire cultural infrastructure. Yet Elena had discovered something crucial. The dragons had encoded their entire cultural memory into their genetic structure, specifically in the patterns of their wing membranes. Each generation was born with this knowledge intact, requiring only the collective harmonic, the memory song, to activate it fully. The 8 juvenile dragons in Vin's care represented perhaps the last intact repository of an entire civilization's knowledge and history. On the 15th day of their journey, as they approached the outer boundaries of the system containing their destination, Scout appeared in the cockpit with unusual urgency. Its wing patterns displayed a complex sequence that Vin had never seen before, and its harmonic trills carried a clear sense of warning. Before Vin could interpret the message, the shuttle's sensors detected multiple approaching vessels, not the isolated patrol of their previous encounter, but a coordinated formation that suggested deliberate interception. "They found us," Vin muttered, initiating evasive procedures. "But how?" The answer came as the sensor display refined. The lead vessel wasn't corporate security, but a specialized hunter-class ship typically employed by high-end collection operations, wealthy individuals or organizations willing to pay premium rates for rare acquisitions. Somehow, word of the Dragonlings had spread beyond Karis Station. "We need a diversion," Vin told Scout, who trilled in apparent agreement before returning to the cargo compartment. Within moments, the harmonic cascade began again, but this time with a different quality, more focused, almost surgical in its precision. The shuttle's communication system broadcast a series of tightly beamed transmissions, each directed towards specific coordinates in the surrounding space. On the sensor display, Vin watched in astonishment as the hunter vessels suddenly diverged, chasing phantom signals in multiple directions. The Dragonlings weren't simply creating sensor confusion this time. They were generating convincing decoy signatures that mimicked their own unique energy patterns. Taking advantage of the distraction, Vin pushed the shuttle's engines beyond recommended limits, accelerating toward the gas giant, now visible in the distance. According to the navigation data, their sanctuary moon orbited the far side of the massive planet, its position currently shielded from direct observation. "Just need to reach the gravity well," Vin muttered, watching the pursuit vessels regroup as they began to recognize the deception. "Once we're in range, we can use the slingshot effect to gain speed." Scout returned to the cockpit this time, accompanied by the largest Dragonling. Together, they positioned themselves near the crystal, their wings creating overlapping patterns that somehow interfaced directly with the navigation system. The display shifted, revealing subtle gravitational currents within the gas giant's influence pathways, invisible to standard sensors, but potentially decisive for their escape. "Show me," Vin said, understanding their intent. The dragonling's wing patterns shifted again, highlighting a specific approach vector that would use the planet's complex magnetic field as additional concealment. It was a dangerous trajectory, requiring precision beyond typical civilian navigation systems, but if successful, it would break their pursuers' tracking ability. With the hunter vessels closing distance, Vin committed to the approach, guiding the shuttle into the first phase of the gravitational descent. The hull vibrated as they encountered the outer layers of the gas giant's atmosphere, not enough to create dangerous friction, but sufficient to disrupt standard tracking methods. Behind them, the hunter vessels hesitated their pilots, likely calculating the risk-reward ratio of following a potentially suicidal trajectory. Commercial hunters, while determined, operated on profit margins that didn't justify vessel loss. The gamble paid off. As they curved around the gas giant's massive bulk, accelerating through its gravitational field, the pursuit vessels fell away, reverting to standard patrol patterns that would monitor the system's established exit vectors. When they emerged on the far side of the planet, their sanctuary moon came into view, a small, cratered body, with a thin atmosphere unremarkable by most standards. But as they approached, Vin noticed unusual formations across its surface. Crystalline structures arranged in patterns that echoed the dragonling's wing membranes. Scout and the other dragonling trilled with evident excitement, their harmonics creating a resonance that caused the data crystal to pulse with increasing intensity. The navigation display refined further, guiding them toward a specific region near the moon's equator, where the crystalline formations formed a circular arrangement, a landing site designed not for conventional vessels, but for beings who navigated by harmonic patterns. "Home," Vin said softly. "You're almost home." The landing sequence was unlike any Vin had experienced during his military or civilian flights. Instead of traditional beacon signals, the shuttle's systems responded to harmonic patterns emanating from the surface guidance provided in the dragonling's native communication method. Scout positioned itself directly before the main viewport, its wings extended to match the patterns visible on the surface below. Through this living navigation interface, Vin adjusted their descent, following the harmonic pathways that led to the circular formation. As they approached, the crystalline structures on the surface began to glow with soft blue light, responding to the dragonling's presence. The circular arrangement revealed itself as an ancient landing platform, not constructed from solid materials, but formed from precisely arranged resonance points that created a stable field. The shuttle settled onto this invisible but tangible surface, with surprising gentleness, the harmonic field absorbing their momentum more efficiently than any mechanical system could have managed. When the engines powered down, Vin performed a rapid atmospheric analysis. The moon's thin atmosphere was technically breathable for humans, though its composition would make extended exposure uncomfortable without supplemental oxygen. For the dragonlings, however, it appeared ideal, rich in the trace elements they required for optimal functioning. "We made it," he told Scout, who had remained in the cockpit throughout the landing sequence. "This is your sanctuary." Scout trilled softly in what Vin had come to recognize as affirmation, then glided toward the cargo compartment, where the others waited. Their collective harmonic rose in a gentle crescendo, no longer constrained by the need for secrecy or energy conservation. Vin prepared the exit sequence, donning a light environmental suit that would provide supplemental oxygen and temperature regulation. As the airlock cycled open, the dragonlings gathered near the exit, their wings fully extended in anticipation. The moon's surface stretched before them, its crystalline formations glittering in the light of the distant sun. What had appeared as random craters from orbit now revealed themselves as deliberate arrangements, massive harmonic focusing arrays designed to channel and amplify the dragon's communications across planetary distances. Scout was the first to emerge, its wings catching the sunlight and refracting it in patterns that seemed to activate the surrounding crystals. One by one, the other dragonlings followed, each adding their unique harmonic signature to a growing symphony that resonated through the ancient structures. As the final dragonling exited the shuttle, Vin followed his steps careful on the unfamiliar surface. The environmental suit's sensors registered the harmonics as subtle vibrations, a pale shadow of what the dragons themselves must be experiencing. The effect on the sanctuary was immediate and astonishing. Throughout the visible landscape, crystalline structures that had appeared dormant began to pulse with internal light, responding to the dragon's presence. What had seemed like a desolate moon was revealing itself as an intricately designed living environment, a civilization preserved in harmonic stasis, awaiting the return of its caretakers. Vin stood motionless watching as the dragonlings performed a complex aerial dance above the central crystal array. Their wings created overlapping patterns that somehow interacted with the structures below, awakening systems dormant for perhaps centuries. From the crystal arrays rose holographic-like projections, three-dimensional representations of what Vin recognized from Elena's research as mature chorus dragons, their forms magnificent and complex compared to the juveniles in his care. The projections moved with lifelike precision, demonstrating flight patterns and harmonic techniques that the young dragons immediately began to emulate. A teaching program, Vin realized aloud. The sanctuary preserved your cultural knowledge. Scout broke from the aerial formation, returning to hover before Vin. Its harmonic trill carried a complexity he hadn't heard before, perhaps the beginning of adult vocalization patterns. From its wing membranes emanated a projection similar to those from the crystal arrays, but this one depicted human figures alongside chorus dragons, working in apparent cooperation. Your ancestors and mine, Vin, interpreted, recognizing the distinctive uniforms of early galactic exploration teams. Before the corporations took over, Scout's affirmative trill was followed by a more complex harmonic sequence. In Vin's mind, formed not just images, but emotions, gratitude, invitation, and purpose. The dragonling wasn't simply thanking him for the rescue, it was offering him a place in their revitalized sanctuary. The realization struck with unexpected force. Throughout his military career and the aimless years that followed, Vin had never found a true home, just temporary postings and rented quarters. Now, standing on an ancient moon at the edge of charted space, he felt a sense of belonging that transcended his human origins. "I'll stay," he told Scout, decision forming, even as he spoke the words. "At least until you're fully established. Someone needs to maintain contact with the Galactic Council, ensure this sanctuary receives official protected status." Scout's wings flashed in patterns that matched the surrounding crystal arrays, acceptance and confirmation. Then, it rejoined the others in their aerial dance, adding Vin's decision to their collective knowledge. Standing on the ancient platform watching the dragonlings awaken their inherited civilization, Vin felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The burdens of his military past, the losses, the moral compromises, the sense of futility, seemed less consuming in the face of this new purpose. Elena would have considered this the perfect outcome, not just the preservation of an endangered species, but the revival of their cultural heritage. Her research, combined with the dragonling's own knowledge, would ensure the chorus dragons had a future beyond mere survival. As the sanctuary's harmonic systems continued to activate around him, Vin removed the data crystal from his portable reader. It pulsed with gentle light, synchronized with the larger crystals of the dragon architecture. After a moment's consideration, he placed it within a small recess in the central array, where it integrated seamlessly, a bridge between human science and dragon culture. The smallest dragonling Scout glided down to perch beside him as he completed this final task. Together, they watched as the sanctuary awakened fully, living architecture rising from harmonic foundations. The other dragons spiraled overhead, their flight patterns tracing the star maps encoded in their wing membranes. Not just navigation guides, but the history of their species written in light and motion. Vin smiled, feeling a sense of completion that had eluded him since his discharge. He had found something worth protecting again, just as Elena had predicted. And in doing so, he had found himself. In the growing light of the sanctuary, a retired Earth Marine and 8 young dragons stood united guardians of a reborn civilization. Above them, the gas giant filled half the sky, its swirling surface reflecting the crystalline light of the awakening moon, a beacon visible across the system announcing, to any who might see it, this place is protected. This culture lives. And for those who might challenge that declaration, a simple warning to reach this sanctuary: you must first pass its guardian, a battle-worn veteran who had finally found a cause worthy of his remaining years. Behind Vin, the dragonling's song rose in perfect harmony, not a lamentation for what was lost, but a celebration of what had been reclaimed. He straightened his shoulders, military bearing returning naturally as he surveyed their domain. "Welcome home," he said, words meant for both the dragons and himself. "Welcome home.